So once I got here was when I really started thinking about other options.
Right. Because it's interesting because, like, you know, me, I'm from New York, and I was doing fitness in New York, but when I came out here, there's something about, and I tell this to a lot of younger people, it's something about like relocating into a whole new environment where like starting fresh just feels so like nothing can hold you back, right? Because usually when you're in an environment where everything you're so used to, you know, the people you're around, people that you may even enjoy and love, but they're kind of like distractions to some degree. So when you start, you have a passion, and then you also have the space to practice that passion, and like it just kind of connects.
And by the way, I do want to say, I think a change in location, I do agree that helps with the mindset, but LA especially, this is a very special city. I think that just the fact that you have so many people coming here to pursue a dream, whether it's in acting or music or not even in the arts, I really think that actually fed into my motivation to try something new. I think so highly of this city.
I totally agree with you because doing podcasts now,
yeah.
I didn't think I would be doing this. You touched on most of the things that, it was a loaded question, so I knew that I was going to get a lot out of that question that I asked in the beginning because basically ties into the other things that I wanted to get into. All right, so, you know, me, I teach boxing, I train people, I coach people for a living. I get enjoyment out of like working with people. It sounds like you get enjoyment out of working with people. Teaching also teaches me a lot because like when I work with people and I teach people, whether it be an 80-year-old or 8-year-old, you learn so much about human nature. You learn so much about how people learn certain learning styles. What have you learned over the years by not only you know, learning the process for yourself and starting a business and running a business, but also just teaching people, like teaching young kids, maybe adults? What have you learned from that?
Okay, so the first thing that pops in my mind, I'm going to go back to something that somebody said to me, a movie director said to me about my business years ago. And he said, you know, I thought about being a math teacher or a math tutor at one point, but I just felt like it was such a repetitive process. Every year you kind of teach the same curriculum and it's rinse and repeat, so it felt like it would eventually get boring. And I remember hearing that and thinking, yeah, you could kind of look at anything that way. I could look at making a movie that way. Every time you have to hire the cast, you have to set up the lights, it's like the same thing over and over. That doesn't sound very fun, but obviously that's not how they look at it. And it's actually a lot of fun because each film is a new creative process within that story, bringing that story to life, working with these unique actors. Education is the exact same way. Working with people is the exact same way. It's not that you're teaching, yes, you're teaching maybe the same technique or similar principles, but the most important thing, in my opinion, especially with one-on-one work, which you could probably attest to, is the real key is the connection aspect, you know, basically understanding each individual's learning style and then being able to adapt to it. So that's the unique puzzle every time that makes this job so exciting and so incredible.
Yeah, which gets me into my next question. You know, me, I've always been a fan of math. Like I love math. I told you last year I started getting into computer science and you know, just now into AI and all this stuff, which we're going to touch on that in a bit. But I had to really learn my learning style. For me, it took me years. Like where I grew up in Brooklyn, you know, I didn't get like the top of the line or private education. So over the years, as I got exposed to the internet and started to learn more about like human psychology and different learning styles and, you know, especially like kinesthetic learners, people that have to touch and feel things. What is the most common learning style you come across?
Now, if you're talking about so I remember I did an entire video on like, hey, you could be a kinesthetic learner, you could be, you know, learn auditory, etc. I'd say at this point, it's not so much where I try to classify within, I think there was like 7 categories, I remember back in the day, or 6 categories, whatever it might be. It's not exactly that I'm trying to categorize and then apply something. What it is and what it's ended up becoming for me is more just a game of just constant listening and paying attention, just watching and being like, and also one of the elements that's very important for me is I've seen all these math principles and math problems so many times. I know, you know, 10 different ways, 20 different ways to approach the same problem. So it's a bit of trial and error. So it's not necessarily about identifying the learning style, but just being like, okay, let me just connect with this student and understand exactly which angles to come from. Typically, let's just take a standardized test example, is this option of maybe solving in reverse by taking some of the answer choices and plugging in, is that typically making more sense, or do they prefer to use the calculator to assist them more, or do they prefer, you know what I mean? It's like, it's more of touch and feel and really paying attention to what connects with the students and constantly asking questions. All right, wait, did that make sense? The other thing is you have to create, and this is probably the same in fighting and boxing and martial arts and whatnot, you have to create a safe environment, meaning I have to make sure that my students feel totally comfortable asking questions, totally comfortable
1000%.
failing, you know what I mean? Otherwise, you can get into a situation where you're like, all right, does that make sense? Yeah, it made sense. But they just don't, maybe it doesn't, but they're a little bit nervous or uncomfortable to let you know the reality.
There's, did you read Emotional Intelligence?
No.
It's a great book, and there's this, it dives into basically like, being intelligent emotionally, right? Learning how to connect with people on certain levels, especially when you're trying to show somebody something that they're probably vulnerable, right? I can imagine you're working with somebody and not confident with math, so to just even kind of make a relationship with them so learning can actually happen. It's the same thing I experienced in coaching. I try to get to know, a friend of mine years ago told me it's called personal training, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to get personal with the person. So how do you build that personal connection with some of your clients and students?
Part of it, I think, is just in my nature. I'm never going to be the guy who's going to be yelling at you or kind of being like, dude, how are you not getting it, or something like that. That would never even cross my mind to say something like that. Part of the reason I would never do that is because I'm so sensitive myself, and I know how that would feel to me, and it would have hurt a lot, especially as if I was a kid and somebody would be like, how are you not getting it? I just feel so bad. So I'm very, very careful to never do that, and I think that helps to build trust with my students because they know I'm going to try and I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to be critical of them. I'm just here to support them. And then the other thing is when we're starting out and we're working on problems, make sure to let them know if they're feeling any sort of time pressure or whatnot, just constantly reminding them, by the way, I want you to take as much time as you need on this problem. Just think it out, take your time, and ask me any questions if you have questions. So it's sort of like that. I think that as they get to work with me more and more, they see, oh yeah, like I can make mistakes and it's no big deal. And a lot of times I'll even celebrate the mistakes, especially with test prep, because many of the mistakes, if not all of them, I call them learning mistakes. All right, now you learned how you got this one wrong. Now we can adjust and adapt going forward. Just like, right, when you teach me when I'm dropping my guard when I throw a jab and you tag me in the face, it's a learning mistake.
It's the best time to learn.
Yeah.
You learn at times where you make the mistake. And I think teachers are the people that capture that moment and they highlight it and they say, look, it's like the director. It's like, they stop everything and they go, do you see that moment right there where you went wrong? And then that's where all the magic happens.
One other thing I want to add to that. Okay, think about this as well. This is another very important role for a teacher, especially in a teacher-student relationship, is respect. And there has to be respect. But I won't always get the respect of my students, and then that would be a situation where maybe it's not a good fit.
Right.
But I do think it has to be there, because think about it like this, right? I could have 10 coaches tell me the same thing, but for some reason maybe you don't listen. You have your parents tell you the same thing over and over and you don't listen. But then it takes that one person to say it to you. Maybe you look up to them, or they're your idol, or they're your favorite actor, or something like that. And they say it, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do that, right? So I
see it all the time.
You have to have that relationship. They have to look up to you, honestly. And if they don't, it's just gonna be half as effective at best.
It's a firm relationship you build where it's like, they feel comfortable with you, but like you said, they respect you, and you earned that respect.
Yeah.
All right, so this is kind of a big loaded question, but I just want to get your thoughts on it. So, in the world of education, I went to public school, and some public districts are great, some are not the best. Again, I didn't get like the top of the line education.
Yeah.
So I think about like the future now. I think about, we'll dive in later on and talk about AI and how that's going to affect education. But I think about like, what do you think right now currently with our education system could be improved? What do you like? What do you think about that?
Oh man, that is a big question, because here's the way that I look at myself within the educational system. I almost look at myself in a similar position as a defense attorney in a lot of ways. So there's a system that exists. I'm not necessarily at the top trying to reconfigure the system, because it should be reconfigured, and there's a lot of things that should be optimized. I sort of come in and say, hey, this is the system, but I'm going to help you navigate it to the best of your ability. I'm going to help you shine as much as you can shine, and we're going to go from there. Now, if you, let's say, took me out of this role and placed me in a position where it's like, okay, now from a top-down level, I'm going to restructure some things. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be changed. But for example, I think the first question we need to ask is, what is the goal of education? Is it to assimilate you into society so you can be a productive member of society and add value? Is it to compare and contrast students to see who are better fit to complete this task, who are better fit to complete that task, etc.? And if that's the case, then maybe academics already does that, because we have a system where we're testing students continuously with standardized tests, with regular tests, and we can compare and contrast. Yeah. Okay, I think that probably we'd like to move closer to a society where school serves the former function, meaning it's really preparing you or allowing you to come in and really add value right out the gate. So what we have right now in the education system, and which is especially becoming apparent with AI growing so rapidly, is I think we have a lot of things that are outdated, math included. But math is not the biggest culprit. Math gets the majority of the blame, because people are like, well, when am I going to use this? Yeah, that's fair, but probably like, when are you going to use most of the stuff in terms of history, in terms of chemistry? Yeah. Now there's value, unless you're going to be a chemist, or unless you're going to be a doctor, maybe biology is relevant then, right? But if you're not, a lot of the value goes out the door. So what I think would make sense long term for the education system is maybe start to look back. Yes, some of the fundamentals for mathematics, just understanding the language of mathematics, being able to communicate with fractions and percentages and decimals and things like that, I still think are very important.